My name is Dr. RickyAllmon. I'm the author of the Life Lessons book, Living in Full Effectiveness. This book was inspired by my favorite book in the Bible, which is the book of Proverbs, which gives us more than principles and philosophies, but it provides practical application for daily living. It is important that we understand how not to just navigate the function of our life, but how to negotiate the roles in our life. Your functions may change, but your roles are constant. And so through the Life Lessons journey, I want to encourage and empower you how to turn your failures into your focus, how to use your fears as your fuel so that you can maximize your potential and be productive in your purpose. In other words, this book is designed for everyday people to get everything out of life.
Dr. RickyAllmon's new book, Life Lessons, is focused on purpose, productivity, and faith. Let's first talk about the book that you have.
So you have 31 Proverbs, but my favorite one is actually the first one. Of course, anybody going through the book, they may have another one that's their favorite, but my favorite is the first one. It's called Show Your Scars. And that life thought deals with the fact that your scars are more than a reminder of your past.
Absolutely.
It's a reward for your survival.
Yes.
It's a sign that your wound has healed. And so oftentimes when people look at their scars, they go, oh, there can't be anything good about this, because they think about the miserable moment or the unfortunate circumstance that gave them that scar. What they're not realizing is that scar is actually a sign that there's more left in front of them than behind them. Ralph Waldo Emerson said it best. He said, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. RickyAllmon, and welcome to Life Talks Leadership After Dark. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm excited about our conversation. Glad to have you with me tonight in what I call our virtual hood, our virtual neighborhood. It's amazing. We're 10 weeks in to what has been known as the pandemic, dealing with this virus that has infected the globe. And so the whole world now has become a virtual neighborhood. And so I'm glad you just stopped by to hang out with me a minute tonight. Here's what I need you to do quickly so we can get into this conversation and so you can go back and finish whatever you were eating or whatever you were doing. But I believe I've got something that's worth your time tonight. If you're on Facebook, go ahead and share this conversation on your timeline and start a watch party. There are people that may not know me, but they know you and they value the things that you value. So if you'll share this on your Facebook page, they'll stop by and possibly hear what I have to say. So when you're telling them about what you heard, you're like, ooh, Dr. Allmon said this. They're like, who's Dr. Allmon? But put it on your page so they'll know who you're talking about. Those that are on on YouTube, I ask that you like this. I ask that you subscribe to the Ricky Allmon YouTube channel and then share this video. And of course, those that are on Twitter, go ahead and share it on your timeline. And hello, Periscope. They're out there somewhere. Thank you for joining me. Listen, we're about to get into this conversation tonight. So let's do a quick quarantine roll call. Shout out where you're on from. Give me your first name. Give me your first name. I know some names are showing up if you're on Facebook, but give me your first name and where you're representing from so I can give you a shout out. We call this the quarantine roll call. Go ahead and shout out your first name and where you're coming on from so I can know who's hanging with me tonight. Go ahead and share this. If you're just coming on, please share this on your platform so that other people can join in and watch. Listen, while I'm talking, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have insights, you don't just have to listen to me. I'm also listening to you. I want to hear your thoughts and what you have to say. A conversation requires two-way engagement. So you're a part of this conversation with me. Let's do our quarantine roll call. So quickly, give me your first name and where you're coming on from. I just like to know who's hanging out with me in this virtual neighborhood tonight. I hope your family's well. I hope your life is prospering. I hope things are getting better for you. I hope you're moving forward. And I'm so glad to have you here. Listen, go ahead now and text the word Impact Life to 31996. Text the word Impact Life. My mother-in-law is on here tonight from NOLA. Gloria is here from Chicago. Thank you for joining us, Gloria. I'm so excited to have you all in the room with me tonight. Keep going with the quarantine roll call. As you come on, shout out where you're coming on from. But if you want to keep up with what I'm doing and what I'm sharing, you want to make sure you know whenever I come on live to share something with you, text the word Impact Life to 31996 and join in with others who receive a text message whenever we're going live. So go ahead and do that now. Text the word Impact Life to 31996 so you can join in with others that are coming on. I want a few more shout outs here. So a few more people, shout out where you're coming on from. Give me your first name and let me know where you're coming on from. Lori from Iowa. Thank you for joining, Lori. Lori, good to have you. Lori, go ahead and share this on your timeline so other people can join in. Give me a few more shout outs here tonight. Don't be bashful. Don't be bashful. You're here already. So a few more people. Let's shout out here. I see you watching. I see you hanging out in the room. You don't have to be a lurker. You're here now. You're in a friendly, safe space. So give me a couple of more people to shout out, and we're going to move forward in this conversation tonight. So how's everybody's day been? How is the weather where you are? Is it warm? I know if you're in NOLA, it's hot. Louisiana is, I'm sure it's sweltering by now. Chicago is getting warmer. We're dealing with a little rain, but it's trying to warm up just a little bit. So give me a couple of more people. We're doing the quarantine roll call. Shout out your first name and your city. Let me know where you're on from so we can get into our subject matter at hand. Laura, you say it's damp in Iowa. Yeah, Iowa kind of gets whatever Chicago has. What they say, if Chicago has the flu, Iowa gets a cold. So that's how it is. So last week, I talked about integrity. And I dealt with integrity from an angle that we don't often consider. And that is integrity in the context of being truthful about who you are to yourself. That's what we talked about last week. If you missed that conversation, all you have to do is go to episode 6. That's what last week was, episode 6. And you can watch that conversation. Well, after we finished talking about that over the past few days, that concept of being honest with yourself about yourself would not let me go. It seemed to just linger. And so I thought it would be good to revisit that and to expand on the conversation that we began last week. And so tonight I want to deal with the subject, you don't have to lie. That's what I want to talk about tonight. You don't have to lie. I don't know how many of you saw the movie Friday. I know there's been several of them, but the first Friday that had Mike Epps and John Witherspoon, rest in peace, and it had Ice Cube and Nia Long. Well, in that first Friday, there was a particular scene where a young lady that Ice Cube's character, whose name was Craig was dating a young lady who called him to check on his whereabouts. And Craig was making up all kind of tall truths about where he was and what he was up to and why he hadn't seen her. To which this young lady responded on the other end of the phone, "You ain't got to lie, Craig." And so that's where the inspiration for my title comes from tonight. It comes from Friday. But I want to talk to you about the lies we often tell ourselves. That's what I want to talk about tonight. I want to talk about the lies that we often tell ourselves. And so our subject tonight is you don't have to lie. Here's something I want you to consider. Every living organism, think about this. Every living organism demands accountability from the environment that it's in, or it dies. Think about that. Every living organism on the planet demands accountability from the environment it's in, or it dies. As a matter of fact, when it comes to animal life, if you go to the zoo, there is something called a natural habitat. So if they take an elephant or a giraffe or a zebra, a lion, a chimpanzee from somewhere in Africa, and they bring it to America, the zookeepers have the responsibility of putting that animal in what we call a natural habitat. Why? So that animal will be able to sustain life as if it was in its original ecosystem. So every living organism demands accountability from the environment that it's placed in, or it will die. If you see a beautiful rose a rose bush just out on the side of the road, and you say, I'm going to take some of these roses home. In order for those roses to sustain life, what do you have to do? You got to put them in some water. You got to give them some plant food. That rose demands an accountability from you to create an environment for it so that it can function according to who it is and what it's designed to do. Here's why I bring this up. As human beings, we are the only living organisms that don't make people around us accountable for the environments that we engage them in. What does that mean? That means we'll allow ourselves to be in ecosystems that don't cultivate our identity, that don't catalyze our purpose, and we will make ourselves comfortable in environments that we know are not conducive to who you are. I said it. We're the only living organism that will make ourselves comfortable in environments that we know do not facilitate who we are. And here's what's interesting, whether we realize it or not, if we allow ourselves to coexist in environments that don't feed our authenticity, then guess what happens? Our identity begins to die. Our passion begins to languish. Our purpose becomes diminished. And we end up capitulating and acquiescing to who other people say we should be and what other people say we ought to be doing, instead of us being and doing who and what we know we were designed for. I don't know if I should get in your business already tonight, but I want to be a little nosy. I really want to know, are you making your environment accountable for who you really are? Do the people around you, the job that you work on, do you make them accountable in how they engage you, in what they ask for you, so that it brings out the best in you? That's very critical, because as quiet as it's kept, you should not continue in any ecosystem that doesn't cultivate your identity and catalyze your purpose. So here's what I want to ask you tonight. What are some of the reasons that, unlike plants and unlike other animal life, what are some of the reasons that we don't make the environments we're in accountable for our identity? What are some of the reasons that we allow ourselves to coexist in ecosystems that we know are literally draining the life out of us? Why do we do that? Why do we engage what we call friendships that don't add anything positive to our lives? Why do we allow ourselves to remain in connections or communities that don't encourage us and edify us and equip us and empower us? May I suggest 3 reasons that we do it? There are 3 reasons why we allow ourselves to coexist in unhealthy environments and ecosystems that don't bring out our authentic identity. The first reason is convenience. We're creatures of habit. And so many people live by the philosophy, if it's not broke, don't break it. Well, I'd like to add an addendum to that. You may say, if it's not broke, don't break it, as it relates to routines you have in your life. But what if it's breaking you? What if it's debilitating for you? I know that this may be a routine that you're used to. I know this may be a relationship that's been long standing. But what do you do when it's lost its functionality? So a lot of us don't make our environments accountable for who we are out of convenience. We don't want to ruffle any feathers. We don't want to cause any waves. Oh, the metaphors can go on. But the reality is, for the sake of convenience, why stay connected to something or somebody that you know doesn't really value who you really are? Think about that. You're staying connected to something that's not bringing the best out of you, that's not encouraging the best for you. And yet you allow yourself to stay connected to it. Yet you allow yourself to continue to engage it. And so this is something that we really need to deal with tonight and understand and ask ourselves, why am I allowing this to happen in my life? So the first reason that we allow ourselves to stay in environments that don't encourage the best for us or bring the best out of us is out of convenience. The second reason we stay in environments that don't bring the best out of us is for the sake of connection. Just to have the fraternity. I just want to be around somebody. But they're not encouraging you. Anytime you try to be yourself, they have something negative to say about it. But for the sake of connection, just so you can say you got some friends or you've got some fellowship, you'll maintain something. And here it is. There's nothing worse than engaging something as functional that has become dysfunctional. That's the greatest delusion in the world. To function with something that's become dysfunctional. And that's what happens when you engage somebody or something out of convenience or for the sake of connection that you know doesn't value who you are authentically. The third reason that people don't make their environments accountable for their authentic identity is just out of conformity, just familiarity, just social conditioning, wanting to be accepted. And so because I want you to like me or like a version of me that you're comfortable with about me, even though I'm not being me, I would rather be around you and deny me than to not be around you and be fully me. I told you, you ain't got to lie. You don't have to live like that. Here is how most people live. Most people live in what is known as reflective identity. That's how most people live. Most people live in reflective identity. Reflective identity is when you co-opt your authentic identity so that you can mirror whatever your current environment says you should act like. That's what reflective identity is. Reflective identity is when you co-opt or compromise your authentic identity. Authentic identity is a mantle that's on your life. Authentic identity is where your creativity is. Authentic identity is where your power is. Authentic identity is where your passion is. Authentic identity is where your purpose is. But when you walk in reflective identity, you trade all of that in so that you can mirror whatever the environment around you dictates that you should be. And what's interesting and intriguing about that, then we have the nerve to complain when we don't get back what we need. Well, guess what? You're not going to get what you need from an environment if you don't make that environment accountable for who you are. Because how is that environment going to give you what you need when you didn't show up with who you know you were? And so that's what happens with reflective identity. You become a mirror of whoever you're around. We used to call it being a chameleon, not a comedian, but a chameleon. You know, those little lizards that take on the color of whatever they're on. If they're on a green leaf, they're green. If they're on a brown twig, they're brown. That's what it looks like. It also means being ambiguous. It's being ambiguous. And understand, that's not what the Bible means when it says you become all things to all men. That's not dealing with identity. That's dealing with engagement. It's dealing with having the wisdom to know how to engage people. But you're not created to become somebody else based on the environment you're in. You know why? Because if you shift who you are to fit in places you don't belong, then that environment is never going to get what it needs from you that could possibly help that environment change. And you're not going to get from it what you need to sustain being who you are. So here is how most people live. Most people live in what I call the box. What is the box? The box, listen to this. The box is simply labels, limitations, and liabilities that have been imposed on your life that you define your life by. The reason most people can't tell the truth about their life is because they've put their life in a box. They've locked their life up. They've locked their life up in labels that somebody's put on them or that they put on themselves. They've locked their lives up in liabilities. In other words, failures that they've had, frustrations they've dealt with, areas of deficiency or areas of weakness. And so they wear that liability and that becomes a box. Or they've locked themselves in a box of limitations. Just negative self-talk. Or what somebody else has told them they can't do. And what's dangerous about the box is it creates a narrative about your life that was never designed for your life. So over these next 15 minutes, I want to speak to your box. I want to speak to whatever it is, the limitations, the liabilities, the labels that you've allowed to be placed on your life that keep you from telling the truth about who you are. You don't have to lie anymore. You don't have to be an imposter of yourself. As a matter of fact, if you're ready to attract everything that belongs in your life, it's time for you to show up for your life. And I'll tell you what's very dangerous. What's dangerous about being an imposter to yourself is you can actually forget which you is the real you. Because you spent so much time hiding from yourself and wearing things as you that are not you until you go to the closet and say, well, which one of these are really me? And so that's what I want to help you with tonight. I want to help you to discover you so you can get the right narrative about you. There are four things, four questions that you have to ask yourself if you're going to tell the truth about yourself. Are you ready for this? There are four things you got to ask yourself if you're going to tell the truth about yourself. The first question you've got to ask yourself is, who am I? Who am I? That's a question of awareness. So the first question you've got to ask yourself is a question that will help you to become self-aware. This question of who am I is loaded, because when you ask yourself, who am I, you have to answer, what do I like? What do I enjoy? What do I want? Those are some of the questions that are answered when you answer, who am I? It's that moment of self-awareness. It helps you to discover your purpose. It helps you to answer the why for your life. It keeps you from being subject to what other people say your life can or cannot be. So if you're going to be truthful with yourself, if you're going to make up your mind that I'm not going to lie to me about me anymore, I'm going to stop allowing other people to be comfortable making me uncomfortable about who I know I really am and what I know I should have. So the first question you have to answer is, who am I? Which is a question of self-awareness. When's the last time you've sat with yourself? When's the last time you've done a personal inventory within yourself about what really matters to you? I think that's what's so powerful about the quarantine that we've been in. It is that it's forced us, though some of us may have been very uncomfortable with it, it's forced us to confront ourselves. It's forced us to have to evaluate our routines and the patterns in our life. So the first question you have to answer is, who am I? That's a question of self-awareness, which helps you to discover purpose. The second question you have to answer is, what do I have? What do I have? In other words, what are my skills? What are my gifts? Let me make it plain. What do I do well? What do I enjoy doing? That's a question of potential. That's self-assessment. So once you become self-aware by asking yourself, who am I? Then you need to do a self-assessment of, what do I have? Now this is a critical question, because when you ask yourself, what do I have? Now you have to make yourself accountable with what you do with what you have. So you have a talent to write. So then you have to ask yourself, where are the books? You have the ability to speak and communicate. You have to ask yourself, what am I doing to give encouragement to others? So all of these areas demand accountability from yourself first, and then they demand accountability from others. So if you're going to be honest with yourself, if you're not going to lie to yourself anymore, number one, you got to ask yourself, who am I? Which is a question of self-awareness. Number two, you have to ask yourself, what do I have? Which is a question of self-assessment. What do you do well? The third question you have to ask yourself is, what am I called to do? What am I called to do? That's a question of allocation. In other words, what opportunities around me can engage and facilitate what's in me? Because every opportunity is not an equal opportunity. All opportunities are not created equal. And every opportunity is not the right opportunity. And see, when you don't know who you are, you'll be trying to do everything for everybody because you don't recognize who you are for yourself. So whenever a person doesn't know who they are, they get their identity from trying to be what other people want them to be, which opens them, are you ready for this? Which opens them to be manipulated. It opens them to be abused. It opens them to be misused. Because when you don't know who you are for you, then you substitute performance for personhood. And you allow what you do to overcompensate for the lack of you knowing who you really are. So what am I called to do? In other words, what is it around me that demands the best from me? What is it around me that knows how to utilize what I have in me? And then the fourth and final question you have to ask yourself, if you're going to be honest with yourself about who you are, and I think this is the most critical question, is where do I belong? That's a question of advancement. That's when you begin to explore possibilities. That's when you begin to see beyond the environment you're in and realize that because of who I am, there is more for me than what I see around me. So let me give you a quick recap. If you want to know your authentic identity, 4 questions you got to ask yourself. Number 1, who am I? Which is a question of self-awareness, which helps you to discover purpose. Number 2, you have to ask yourself, what do I have? Which is a question of self-assessment that helps you to recognize your potential and what you do well. The third question is, what am I called to do? Which is a question of allocation, which leads you to productivity. You're not trying to do everything everywhere for everybody. And let me interject something here. And that is, I talked about this earlier in the week during an Instagram conversation. You've got to discern between who and what deserves the best of you and the best from you. They sound similar, but they're worlds apart. The best from you has to deal with what people get out of your life when you share something from your life. So you share a talent. You share a gift. You use whatever your proficiency is to accomplish a task. That's giving the best from you. But giving the best of you is when you take who you are, the essence of who you are, and you give it to somebody else because you know you can trust them with you. So when it comes to what are you called to do, this question of allocation, which deals with productivity, who do you trust with you? Who do you trust with your fears? Who do you trust with your dreams? Who do you trust with your goals? Who do you trust with your strengths? Who do you trust with your weaknesses? Because whoever you trust with all of those areas is the right environment and a place of accountability for your authentic identity. But if I can't trust you with my life, I shouldn't be giving you all of my life. So you got to discern between who should get something from your life. So when you go to your job, you're giving them something from your life. You're not giving them your life. Because that job doesn't have the capacity to reciprocate and give life back to you. They give you a check. It's a transaction. But when it comes to your authentic identity, you need to have people connected to you that can give back to you what you give to them. Maybe not in the same way, but they understand the value of who you are. And then fourthly, the fourth question is you have to answer the question of where do I belong, which deals with your advancement. Now understand, when you answer this question of where do I belong, that goes beyond where you fit in. Where do you belong deals with where do you function the best. Where do you belong deals with what environments encourage forward movement. What relationships want to see you grow and see you win. And that's the question of possibility. I hope tonight that I've shared something with you to provide insight to inspire you. We're going to be continuing this conversation next week because I'm going to talk about the agreements that you need to have with yourself. That's very critical. It's so important that you come into agreement with yourself. Listen, if this added to you tonight, if this helped you tonight, if you haven't already shared this on your timeline, please go ahead and share it. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Go ahead and like this video and make sure you share it. And then, of course, if you want to stay connected to me to find out about other things that I'll be doing or whenever I get ready to come on, maybe you don't have time to check Facebook or to see if I'm coming on at a particular time, then you can receive a text message to remind you. Also, if you do not have the Life Lessons book, 31 Proverbs for a Life of Purpose and Productivity, I don't just give you philosophies and principles, but I provide practical application so that you could have productive manifestation in every area of your lives, of your life. It's set up like a 31-day journal. There's even a place for each life lesson, with each life lesson where you can write down life notes and things that you've gotten out of that life lesson. So you can go on Amazon, go to Kindle, go to Apple Books, or just go to the lifelessonsbook.com or RickyAllmon.org and you can get it there. And if you're somebody who doesn't like to read, well, you can get the Life Lessons audiobook. And again, that's on all platforms, so you can get that as well. And then remember, on Saturday, I have a conversation with my brother and friend, Stephen Thurston, called The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. It will be streamed. It's a conversation about life and leadership in the digital age. And so I'd encourage you to join that conversation on Saturdays at 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Somebody just asked, Lori just asked, I'm going to put it on the screen. I'm going to end with this. Lori said, what if you don't have any friends or a social life? Great question, Lori. So what you have to ask yourself, again, apply those 4 questions that I gave you, because those 4 questions hold the answer to why you don't have any friends or social life. It comes down to authentic identity. So what you've got to do is, first of all, know yourself. In knowing myself holds the key to unlock everything else in my life. When I know myself, I'm able to know the relationships I need. When I know myself, I'm able to engage the world around me. So it really has to start with you. You have to develop a relationship with yourself. But in order to develop a relationship with yourself, you have to know yourself. So start with the questions. Oftentimes we go to the symptoms without going to the root of the sickness. Start with those 4 questions. Who am I? What do I have? What am I called to do? Where do I belong? Answer those questions, and that will help you in your self-discovery. And as you discover yourself, then you'll discover what you need for your life. Thank you again for joining Life Talks with Dr. Ricky Allmon, Leadership After Dark. We're here every Thursday night at 8:30 p.m. Central Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So come back and join me next week and bring somebody else with you. Have a great rest of the week. I'll see you next week. Love you.